Earlier on today, I sat down to record a podcast episode. I had a great idea and I really wanted to get it out, but I really struggled to put it into a format and a structure that would have made sense, that led people in, that told them what they were going to get, delivered the content, and then recapped at the end. It sounds really obvious and easy, but it's something I really struggle with. And I often just end up turning on my mic and just talking. However, I wanted to change that. And I know I read in a book a while ago, about 4 years ago, in fact, that there was a brilliant framework to do this. The problem is that book was on Audible. So it's an audiobook that I listen to. Like nearly all the books I read in inverted commas because I'm dyslexic and I find audio easier to digest than I do when I read. However, going back to audiobooks is really challenging. There's nowhere to make notes on them or to, take screenshots of things and actually put it somewhere useful. You've got to remember it all, and getting that information back out is an absolute nightmare. So today I decided to fix this once and for all and AI the hell out of the problem by actually getting the AI to do all the hard work for me. And I created a framework that allows me to now get any audiobook or any recorded content for that matter, to transcribe it, to turn it into searchable, indexed source that I can then go back to, whether it's the methodology or the frameworks or the quotes or the summaries or whatever it is I want to get from that book, and actually apply it to my work, but using AI to actually apply it for me. And that's the absolute key. And I'll discuss how I did that at the end in a really simple way. Now, you do not need to be technical to do anything I'm about to describe today, and all the apps I used were completely free as long as you've got some sort of AI subscription. So listen in, and hopefully you'll find this as incredibly useful as I did today.
So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us, who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits, and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day, and this is Systemize Your Success.
So audiobooks are amazing at getting knowledge into your head. You can do them while you're running or cycling or painting the fences or whatever you're doing in your house. And that's basically what I spend a lot of my spare time doing. So that's where I digest a lot of my knowledge that I gather. However, I only retain a fraction of it. I may know there's a good concept there. I may remember something brilliant in a book, or I may hear a great quote. I think, oh, I can use that quote somewhere. Maybe when I'm writing my own book, but trying to remember where the hell I heard that and actually use it in the moment is the challenge. And that is exactly the problem I face today. I knew I'd found this framework in the past. I knew I thought it would be brilliant, but I never got around to fully implementing it, applying it to my podcast. It's actually something I've used in my courses in the past, but never to the podcast. And actually, this is probably where I needed it most. So I went to try and find where I'd written it all down and couldn't. But I did remember what book it was in. So I got that book and I have created a AI-driven open source framework or system to be able to process the book, to create indexed searchable content for grabbing frameworks, for grabbing methodologies, for grabbing quotes, whatever it is I want from that book, and to make them hugely and easily accessible to my AI and to myself, so my AI can actually then apply them in the work that I'm actually doing. That is what I'm doing. This is the meta learning of me creating the thing that created this episode. So hopefully that all made sense. But what I'm going to walk you through now is exactly what I did, how I did it, so you can apply this today by the end of this episode. So as I just mentioned, the problem I've always found with audiobooks is they are great for ingesting knowledge, but terrible for that retrieval. You can't make notes on them. You can't, easily capture a certain part. You can add a few bookmarks in Audible or whatever app you're using. You can try re-listening to parts or whatever, or you can try relying on memory. The latter for me just does not work. I remember a few percent of it. I may hopefully over time get some value from it, but it's very little compared to the amount of incredible knowledge that are in most of the books I read. So what I want to do today is walk you through this 4-step process. But before I get started, I just want to explain a couple of terms you may be familiar with. So if you are, just be patient. But if you're not, it'll just make sure we're all on the same page and we're when I say certain words, you understand the way I mean them in this context. So first of all, transcription, hopefully you probably understand what that means. We're going to take an audio file and we're going to turn it into written language. That's essential when we're using with AI, because AI can read text really quickly. It has to turn audio into text before it can use it. So we want to do that stage first before we apply it to any other AI tools that we're going to use. I used an app called Whisper, which is actually a derivative of Whisper, which is an AI tool for transcribing audio. And the great thing about Whisper is you can install it on your own computer. And so therefore, once it's installed, it's free to run. It's just like a program that processes audio and creates a transcript file off the back of it. There's loads of different models you can get. If you just ask your AI to install one, it should be able to do it. I use Claude AI. I think it's the most easy human interface that I've used. There may be other ones out there, and I'm sure they all do similar things. Another app that I did use was Libation. Libation is a tool for categorizing and organizing all of your Audible books and allowing you to download those in different formats. I downloaded it as an MP3 because that's a format that is usable by different apps and can be easily read by the AI. And then I could then use the Whisper in the AI to transcribe that into an audio, into a transcription or a text document. Later on in the episode, I'll also talk about skills and slash commands. These are terminology within the AI world. A skill can be thought of a complex operation manual that you can give to the AI and it knows what to do. And it also includes all the reference material that it needs. The slash command is like a lightweight version. And actually I use a slash command for this particular project because I'd already created all the source material, as I'll talk about in a bit. And I just wanted to tell the AI where to go and find, for example, the framework I used to structure this episode. I've created that in my learning library from my transcript by going through this process. It sits there. I don't want to duplicate all that into a skill. So I just say to the slash command, hey, go and look at that framework and then structure this episode based on that framework. So that's how the difference between skills and slash commands. And then another thing I'll just mention at the end is the Business Brain or the LLM Wiki, which is by Andre Carpathe's model. He's published that free on GitHub. You can go and check it out. It's a brilliant way of organizing all the data within your world and using an AI to keep it categorized and searchable and usable. So we can actually, whenever we're grabbing information from wherever it is, our own sources or other people's in this case, then we can actually categorize it using your LLM and it's available within your world. Before I go on, there is one caveat that you must be aware of. We're talking here about copyrighted material. So someone records an audiobook or records a podcast or a course, for example, they own the copyright to that. If you then change that format into, for example, a written format, a transcript, you're actually changing the copyright and you don't have the legal right to do that unless it's been explicitly granted. However, there are some exceptions. So for disability, for example, we're allowed to actually change the format to make it more accessible. So in my case, I'm diagnosed with having dyslexia. And so I am within the bounds of UK copyright law and able to turn an audio into a written format so I can read it and use it for personal use. I can't at any point share any of that publicly. And that's absolutely key because that will get you nobbled straight away. So you'll have to make your own judgment about this. If you haven't got a formal diagnosis of a disability where this would be valid and be an exception to the law, you can make your own judgment if this is something you want to do. Okay, so that covers all of the legal jargon and also all of the stuff you need to know. Let's now look at exactly how we do this. Let's go through the 4 steps of building this incredible, powerful tool that I wish I'd done a long time ago, because instantly I've had benefit from it, as in how I've structured this episode. Okay, so step 1 is to get your audio, get it transcribed, and then file it in a proper place. So the way I do this is to use the Libation app to organize my audio files, and then it allows me to download those as MP3 and other formats as well. And then I can use the Whisper installation, which I got Claude to install for me. I have no idea how it installed it. It just did it and it's free. And that sits on my laptop. And I just say to Claude, hey, can you transcribe this audiobook? I built that as a skill in Claude. So a skill called transcribe audiobook. it then knows that I want to take that audiobook and transcribe it and put it into my learning library in the section called Audiobooks. Now I've got the source material. It's the full transcript of the audiobook in the right place. Building that skill, again, is a one-time setup. I just said to Claude, hey, what I want to do is take an audio, transcribe it, and stick it in this folder. Can you set that up for me? And it did it. And that's how we create skills. And then with skills in Claude, anytime you want to do the similar thing in the future, you don't even have to remember what the skill was called. You just simply say, hey, can you transcribe this audiobook? And it will know that you mean, hey, use the skill called transcribe, because that's the way skills are built in Claude. They're built to be human friendly. And so you don't have to sit and remember everything you ever create. Just when you create them, they're set up using a special skill called setup skill or create skill or something like that, and it allows that skill itself builds the skill in a proper format that means that going forward it will work as intended. So that's the absolute key to making this seamless. Is no coding was done by me. Claude did all the hard work. I just told it what I wanted. It went away and built it. And that is the fundamental way that I use, or the main way that I use Claude for 99% of the stuff that I ever build. The next step, and this is a key step to making this useful, we could just leave it as a transcript. And if you ask Claude or AI, hey, can you tell me what was in that book? It will then read the transcript super quick and tell you. But I want to make something that is scalable, that will build with time, and will allow me to actually build sub skills or slash commands off the back of the frameworks and things that I'm actually using this tool to create. And so what I'm doing is creating a library of highly searchable content from the transcripts that I'm putting in here. So I created a skill, which is process transcripts, or process audiobook transcript, I think it's called. And again, I don't need to remember because it just knows when I ask it to do this. That's the whole point. I'm terrible at remembering details like that. So this is, for me, heaven. So I've created this skill, and what that skill does is it takes a transcript, it reads it, and it processes it. It chops it up into chapters if it's needed. It then summarizes each chapter so I can quickly scan through if I want to find some key information, or I can just ask the AI to do that for me and find out where it is. It also creates a library of all the frameworks that were talked about in the book. So for example, it could be a how do you structure a podcast framework, or it could be something like Gino Wickman's level 10 meetings framework. It would then outline that framework within your document, and then it creates an index of all of the frameworks that you've ever got. Because if you have 200-300 audiobooks on my Audible, probably about 150 of those are good business books. So if I start going through those systematically and getting all the frameworks, there's going to be thousands of frameworks. So I want to have something really highly searchable, both for me, but also for the AI. So I can say, hey, is there a framework I can that will help me to do this? So rather than have to go back to a book, find that section, read it, make notes of it, I can use the AI to do all that hard work for me and basically go, yeah, in this book you read 3 years ago, Steve, there's a framework that outlines exactly what the problem you're having here. And then I can apply that to my work. And as I said before, there's a step beyond this, which makes that using AI into a really powerful tool. So do stick around to learn that last step, because it's the absolute game changer. The AI also does a couple of really cool things as well. It indexes all of the quotes from the book, both the quotable parts of that person's book that I might want to reuse later if they say something really cool, but also any quotes that they have used in the book. Like, authors spend a long time finding good quotes, and I read books typically around the subjects of interest that I'm probably going to end up writing books about. So having other people do all of that work, find all these great quotes, and I can then just grab them and put them into an index file, means that when I need a quote, whether it's about systemization, about falling in love, about looking after your kid, or whatever it is, I can just ask my AI to, hey, have we got any quotes about XYZ subject? And it'll go, yeah, you've got these 4 quotes. Here's the sources. This is where you read them. Do you want to use any of these? So again, super like a spin-off idea I had as I was doing this to actually create something even more valuable. The last thing that this skill does is to actually qualitatively analyze the content of that book in terms of how quality it is with regards to research, to references, and to actually the borrowing of other people's frameworks without referencing them, things like that. And so it actually identified in the first book that I put in that the main framework this book was about was actually borrowed from somebody else, a pre-existing author who is a very well-known author, and they borrowed it almost word for word without referencing that. That means that if I want to actually learn about that particular framework in any detail, I'm probably going to go to the source rather than this secondhand knowledge. That was super helpful for me. And also because there was a number of figures quoted in that book, a number of facts quoted in that book that weren't referenced, I can then be, judgmental or make my own judgment about how much I want to invest or believe in that without doing my own referencing and checking. It also spotted a few errors that it actually said, hey, I'm pretty sure that your transcript came out wrong. This word doesn't look right. This author, this person doesn't look right, the name. I'm sure they mean this. And so it'll actually pick up and correct things as you're going through. That's something I baked into the skill to do that as a sense check before it actually writes up anything, to make sure that the material that I'm getting, or the content that I'm getting in my learning library is of like first class. So I'm confident in its validity and also in its quality. And wherever there's a question, then it actually states that, saying, hey, this is unevidenced. You might want to check this source before you actually, go and use this or quote this anywhere else. So it's allowing me to keep my reputation protected, if you like. So I'm not quoting stuff that somebody's made up, or maybe they've misquoted it by mistake, and therefore I'm unable to do that. And this, from being a medical trained professional who've gone through training and written many qualitative reports, done qualitative analysis of reports and medical reports, etc. in the past, then this kind of stuff is just in my mind all the time when I'm reading books and people are just spouting out information. So having that in there as well makes me sleep better at night, or will do. As I said, this is the first time I'm really using it. So the qualitative part was step 3. Step 2 was the processing. Step 3 was the qualitative analysis. Step 4 is then putting it into practice. And this is the one where it turns from being just a learning library, just another bunch of information that you don't actually ever use, to something that becomes a living part of your business that actually changes the way you work for the better. So you get the benefit from those frameworks that you've read about, and you get to actually implement in your business. This is that moment that for me, I was like, I've got it. This is absolutely mega, and I've got to share and tell people about this. So what I did was to get the particular framework that I was looking for. It found it. It put it into my frameworks index. I could then look at it and go, yep, that's the one I want. I then went into Claude, into my marketing repository, which is where I do all my podcast production and promotion. And I said, hey, can you create me a / command that accesses that framework and then goes through my outline, my draft for a podcast, structures it using that to create a structured step-by-step outline for the podcast that follows this particular framework. And also make sure you do X, Y, and Z, whatever else you want to add in. So that X, Y, and Z for me was, after I saw the first draft, it asked me a few questions about, well, how do you intro your podcast? How do you end them? So I said, well, I like to start off with a real life story. Like most of the stuff, nearly all the stuff I ever talk about is like just me learning on the job, so to speak, and sharing my learnings. So like I did today, I talked about, hey, I was actually trying to record a podcast today. It was taking me ages to structure it, and therefore I went and found a solution. And then I want to say, hey, what's the promise of this episode? So by the end of this episode, you're going to get this. And so that gave me that initial structure. And at the end, it's like, well, how do you finish your podcast? Is there a call to action? And typically I say, hey, please subscribe to this so I can teach you more stuff like this, and do share it with anyone else you know who runs a business who might benefit. So that's my close. So then added those bits in, a couple of the tweaks per side, and then I've got something that is very personal, that's based on a proper framework that works or proven to be working. And I can then apply it to any draft for any podcast in the future in seconds. So all that hard work, setting all this up, doing all this, was to get to one end result that I can go, hey, I want to record a podcast on, for example, I'm going to, in the near future, record a podcast about my story over the past couple of years and about the transformation that I've had in terms of the way I see my work, the value of that, my purpose in life, the revolutionary change of my appreciation and gratitude for what I have, and that journey and how powerful that has been for me, and the help I've had and the guidance I've gone through. That's a big thing to try and structure and organize without it just being a boring tell, like me just ranting about my story. Like, no one wants to listen to that unless I can weave it into a framework that makes it super valuable for the listener. That was what I was trying to record this morning when I started this process. And by doing this, I thought, look, I'm going to stop. I'm going to record the meta learning of this, the what I built in trying to record that podcast episode. And then when I've recorded that podcast episode, you'll hopefully see how I applied this new / command to a far less structured type of episode to hopefully produce something that is engaging and also massively valuable to listen to. So if you go away and do this, all of those audiobooks, those courses, anything else you've got on recorded material can become something that is not only highly searchable, highly usable, and something you can actually go back to and find what you read about or heard about in the past or watched in the past, but also something that you can use in your AI to create skills, to create tools that apply those frameworks directly to your business without you ever having to really do anything except for tell your AI what you want to apply it to. That to me is massively valuable and something that I have done in other areas using commands and skills and basically skilling the hell out of our AI and the hell out of everything I've been teaching for 10 years. That's might be my work for the past few months now, to basically turn my own frameworks into / commands and skills. This is now using that same principle, but doing it for the other knowledge that I have, which is all how we all acquire new skills. We learn from other people. And this is a way of then, rather than me having to be the conduit to then create something useful, I'm using AI to do that hard work for me and still getting the results at the end, probably better than I would have created it myself, just because of the time taken to do the stuff properly and iterate. Whereas with AI, you can iterate instantly. You can ask for it to improve. It will make that improvement on the spot and you get to use it there and then. No time lost. So absolutely mega. And moving forward, when this becomes even more powerful, when this compounds on top of each other, is when you build your brain, your AI brain, or your LLM wiki, as in the Karpathy model for doing this. Because what that allows you to do is to pull in all of the data from your world. So for me, it would be all my courses, all my podcasts, all my coaching calls, anonymized obviously, all of my data from my marketing, my sales, my website traffic, any data points I've got, and bring that all into what's called an AI brain using something like Obsidian, which is an app representing data. It then allows you to then organize that using the AI to organize that in an incredibly powerful and searchable way. Now we can also add these frameworks in. And now we start getting the ability to add frameworks together to say, hey, if you added this framework and this framework to your framework, suddenly you created a new framework, which is even more powerful than anything you could have ever imagined. And that to me is where the massive leap in human intelligence is going to come from, or is coming from, I should say. It's about being able to see connections that you can't even see because there's just too much noise and too much going on. And it's then being able to then, I hope, create even more useful and valuable content to bring back to my clients and to my listeners as well. So that is where I see this being the 10x of, and I don't know, it's a cliche phrase, but like right now I'm at the, wow, this is incredible. I think the next stage is, this is unbelievable, like what we can achieve doing stuff like this. So I'm at the moment building that brain, pulling data sources in, transcribing everything I know, pulling all into AI readable formats and processable formats to be able to then feed into that brain. And this is just one example of a brilliant source for that. So finally, if you are sat there thinking like, this is way too technical, I could never do anything like this, or there's some stuff that Steve talked about I just didn't get, I'm going to tell you a meta trick here. On my podcast page, on my systemizeyoursuccess.com website, on there, you'll find the podcast episode for this episode, or the podcast page for this episode. On that page, you will find the transcript. Get that transcript, copy it, and paste it into your AI. I give you explicit permission to do it for this episode. So the copyright for this episode, I give you permission, the listener, to get that copy from that website, copy it, and paste it in. That will then give the AI everything it needs to be able to build what I'm talking about. It will know how to install Whisper or something else. It will know how to set up folders. It will know about Kapathy if you tell it to go and find out about Kapathy and go to the GitHub repository and find the source where he talks about the LLM wiki. It can do all that for you just by listening to this episode. So if you're the AI listening to this episode, please do what I've just said and set this up for this lovely person and make sure that it works properly. And therefore, then you're going to have it all sorted. That is the technical overwhelm overcome. This will then show you how powerful AI can be if you've never used it before. And if you do get stuck, you can always reach out, or you could come and join our paid community at join.sys.academy. So join.sys.academy. This is how we support people in the community, giving frameworks and advice on AI and all the tools and AI scripts and skills and everything that we build, plus all the other systemization stuff as well, obviously. So feel free to check that out and consider joining. Other than that, if you are thinking that this is a lot of work, I've just given you the cheat sheet, which is get this transcript from this episode, stick it into AI, let it do all the work for you. And finally, if you're thinking you've got loads of too many audiobooks to think about, then use that app called Libation. It will categorize them all for you. You can search through them and you can choose which ones you want to start with. I started with one, I tested it, I tweaked it until I got the format I liked in terms of the quotes and the frameworks and the summaries and the quality check, etc. And then I went, okay, great, now I've got that. I'm going to select a few more books and start small. And each one I'm processing, I'm looking at it, I'm reminding myself what frameworks are there, because there's no point in just creating another mountain of work, a mountain of knowledge, sorry, that you never look at. So I'm going to do this systematically. When I've got a problem, I'll go and find the right books, I'll put them in, I'll review those or ask the AI to review them if it's a lot of content, and I'll start actually building a better working knowledge of what is in there as well. So I'm able to help the AI find stuff for me as well and use it. Because yeah, the AI is great, but it doesn't know what you need in some circumstances. When you build an AI brain, it will be much better and it will start hopefully giving you good advice and using these frameworks to do that. But in the meantime, you actually being aware of what's there as well would be valuable. So my advice would be, don't just do a blanket and just get everything in there, which is really tempting because it's really cool and it's really easy to do. I would do it book by book and just quickly spend 10 minutes just reviewing the summary before you then move on to the next one. So you're actually starting to remind yourself of all the great stuff that's in there. And so that's the end of today's episode. If you have enjoyed it, then please do hit subscribe and please do share it with anyone else you know who is trying to run a business, would love to live with more presence, purpose and peace, and just needs a little helping hand to do that, because that is what I am here to do in the world, I believe. And this is my way of channeling this to the world, or to you, the audience, I should say. And finally, a quick reminder, the assignment from this is to find the one book that you can remember that just made the biggest impact on you when you listened to it or even read it. And if you can get that copy, whether it's a PDF, whether it's a transcript or whatever, apply this process to it and just see that then being available for you to use in your business, using AI to apply it for you. You will also be as excited as I am about the implications of this going forward. Thank you very much indeed for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Take care.